I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Canty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight's meeting of the Plymouth Select Board is taking place in a hybrid format. Members of the board are joining us here physically at the Great Hall at Town Hall. Members of the public and presenters may be joining us virtually over the Zoom webinar platform or physically here at Town Hall. Members of the public that wish to participate in this meeting may do so by joining us here in person or may join us over the Zoom webinar platform, the login information for which is included on the agenda that is posted on the town website. Members of the public are also reminded, consistent with Massachusetts general law, that any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of the Select Board after notifying the chair, subject to reasonable requirements of the chair, so as to not interfere with the conduct of the meeting. At the beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any recordings. We are presently aware only of the recording being made by the local scene for broadcast on YouTube and television. You can watch the meeting on television on Comcast Channel 9 or Verizon Channel 47. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I just want to announce, if anybody is in the audience for the Ed Santos Memorial, it's not going to be tonight. I know that some invitations may have went out because due to a couple holdups at the library, it's not going to be tonight. So just want to say, I don't know if anybody's here for that, but okay. All right. Moving right along to the licenses. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. At this time, I'd like to take a moment and remember Margie Burgess. I've served a long time with Margie, Shishi Gahama. A lot of laughs with that woman. But she was a dedicated angel to the community, and I mean that wholeheartedly, and anybody that knows Margie knows that. She even got me, I remember back in 2000 and, well, in a play at the North High School. She talked me into just about everything. And I did it because I knew she wanted me to do it and she wanted me to be a part. And things had slowed down with Shishi Gahama quite a bit. And Margie came up to me and I met her. It was at Selectman Lombard's house at that time. And he said, you know, Dickie, we got to talk about Shishi Gahama and let me tell you what it's about. And she explained it all to me. And I said, well, either we're going to have a sister city or we're not. And from that point on, things turned right around. And we started going there, and they were coming here. And now there's funding, there's sources. That still needs a lot more, but it's come a long way. So I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything before we have a moment of silence, but Godspeed and God bless you, Margie. John?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, not only was Ms. Burgess integral to the success of the sister city relationship with Shishi Gahama, and obviously I know at least three of us have had the opportunity to go over there and experience that firsthand, but I don't have a complete bio in front of us, but obviously a multi-term member of the Plymouth School Committee and really passionate and a product of the Plymouth school systems herself, but very passionate about the students and the education process in this community. And I'm guessing she probably served on the school committee in the 15 to 20 year range, but has been integral in supporting, a lot of the positive initiatives that body has brought forth to the community.
Mr. Butler?
Yeah, I just want to echo, Dickie, some of the things you said. She was a great contributor to the community. I don't know how many years of public service. I mean, she was on the school committee for a number of years, as John said, but she was at every event. She was everywhere, and she never got old. And I know she was a big supporter of the Spire and the Philharmonic at Memorial Hall. She was at all the public events, and she loved Plymouth. She was a great ambassador to Plymouth. In her background, I don't know if people knew about all the kids that she fostered over the years. She told me that story one time. That was an amazing story of what she's done. The people in the community don't even know that. So, Margie, rest in peace. I know you're looking over us right now, so God bless you.
This time I'd like to have a moment of silence. Thank you. Going to move on to the licenses, please. Wish of the board.
Mr. Chairman, unless my colleagues have any questions or want to take anything separately, I would make a motion to approve all the outdoor and amplified music, one-day wine and malt license, one-day all alcohol, special auctioneer, and auto dealer licenses as a group.
Second?
Mr. Canty motions, second by Mr. Golden. Discussion? All in favor? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Bledsoe?
Yes.
Mr. Golden?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Unanimous.
If we're on to the admin notes, I would make, unless my colleagues have a question or want to take any admin notes separately.
I just want to remove number 3.
Okay.
We're waiting a few more things for number 3.
I would make a motion to approve admin notes 1, 2, and then 4 through 9 as a group.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Golden. Discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Bledsoe?
Yes.
Mr. Golden?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Unanimous. So if there's anyone in the audience that was waiting for a license, you're all set. Thank you. Agenda items. I'm just going to move one around and have the Chief Flynn. Dana, come on up, and then we'll go to Mr. Hartman.
Good evening, Dana Flynn, Chief of Police. You have before you tonight I'm requesting approval to have a lease signed with PGDC to rent the lease a spot or an office in their new building on North Street. I'll be using that as a satellite office for a police officer to be assigned, or more than one police officer, a walk and beat, including their additional bicycle units to operate out of their office, to give more of a presence in the downtown area.
We've seen the lease. Any questions? Mr. Canty?
Hi, Chief. Do you, what sort of services do you think you would provide at that, I don't know if you want to call it a satellite station or
Sure.
satellite office or annex or?
Yeah, it's gonna be similar to the office that we run out of Cedarville. However, we're gonna have extended hours. There'll be an officer assigned there, primarily the walking beat. He'll have a place to meet residents or business owners if they have any issues or concerns. That'll just give them a place to work out of and make a presence known. The ultimate goal is to have somebody, officer there from 8 in the morning till midnight.
Okay.
Staffing, if staffing permits it.
Okay.
Again, just to give a presence in the downtown area, especially with all the activities we have
And do you anticipate there'd be one officer at the location?
for now.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Golden, then Mr. Bledsoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, we had spoken earlier about the possibility of, instead of being at the PGDC building, perhaps locating at Town Hall. Could you talk a little bit about that, the thought that you've put into that process in the past?
Early on, when I first thought about finding a location downtown, I did think of Town Hall. But what I'm looking to do is expand the hours, and you need to have access, easy access to the residents, business owners, and whomever. And I don't think the hours would allow for it here. Town Hall closes at noon on Fridays. Again, my goal is to have somebody till midnight or late in the evening at least. I think it would just make it difficult for the people, the citizens, to come and go out of the building, especially once the building's secured. It's so big. I think this location would be perfect for us.
So hours and access would be the biggest
That'd be my
impediments?
biggest concern.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bledsoe?
Hi, Chief, thanks. As you know, you and I worked on this with PGDC. I brought it to your attention that it was available, and the other thing that we got to talk about is the storage.
Right. Right now, for our bicycle units, we transport the bicycles from 20 Long Pond Road in the back of a pickup truck or a cruiser down to the town area. Officers ride during the day, we ride them back. There's ample storage in the basement of 4 North Street where we can store equipment, bicycles, they're charging equipment, the officers riding equipment, and any, other things we may need for future events downtown. So, again, it gives us a unique opportunity that I don't think Town Hall would have been able to offer to us.
And also touch on, it's right in the middle of where all our events are, parade events especially. So the building access up top, the roof access for security, surveillance, also the stage into the great staging area, because it's right in the middle of where that is. If you want to talk about that, how that's going to be
so
helpful to you.
I don't get into some tactical things, but it does give us another opportunity to make observations during our large-scale events. We did, typically, when we have the large-scale events downtown, we like to have roll calls and prior to, typically those events are on holidays. It's difficult to get into this building because we need custodial staff to open the door and lock it up first when we're done. This will give us complete control of when we can come in.
And the last thing is, being a former PGDC member for almost 15 years, when that building was purchased, it was purchased mainly for the parking. The building was with the idea of putting nonprofits in. The C Plymouth is in there now. We wanted to get the chamber, but it didn't work out. So in the Park Plymouth's office is in there. And now to have the PD, and they're renting some of the smaller offices too. And now to have the PD having a satellite there with some police presence, I can tell you that is exactly what, when I was on that board, we wanted to do. In the merchants in the area, the business folks who I'm very close to, everybody's excited because they know they're going to have extra security. They're going to be able to walk across the street or down the street if there's an issue. It's going to be very helpful with, you can have a close working relationship with the parking enforcers if there's any issues. So it's a win for everybody, and the lease is pretty good too. It's not costing the taxpayers any money.
No,
So-
I agree.
So that's probably, for some people, that's probably the most important thing, but the public safety issue of this, it's a win for everybody, so I'm glad, I can't wait to see it open.
Neither can I. I'm very excited for it, and there's something to be said about having a better, reconnecting with the downtown area.
Exactly.
It's difficult being in our current location.
And it's a place where the guys can come in, write their reports if they have to, or it's just, it's a win. It's great job.
Thanks. And thank you.
Any other comments for the chief? Wish of the board?
Make a motion that we approve and enter into the lease agreement as outlined in the materials.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Blitzer. Discussion? Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes, unanimous. Thank you,
you,
chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Mr. Hartman? Welcome, Mr. Hartman.
Lee Hartman, Director of Planning and Development for the town. I was asked to come and just give a quick overview to the board about some of the challenges related to moratoriums. So I guess some people have heard, why not? And I would agree, we have a lot of residential growth in this community. It would be nice to see it slow down a little bit. And I understand the concerns that community has about that and saying, why not just a moratorium? But as I go through this, you'll see that a moratorium is a very difficult, if not impossible, type of thing to administer or apply, especially to a town like Plymouth. So first of all, I always like to start this by noting that the the American Association of Planners does recognize Massachusetts as having some of the worst land use laws in the United States. So though we're recognized for very strong environmental laws, they recognize our zoning bylaws that the state has as being very outdated. So when we talk about a moratorium and say, how do we do that? See, the first thing is you must identify a specific issue. You can't simply just say, we've had too much development, or we think there might be a problem with something. You have to identify a definite issue. And it can't be town-wide. It has to be targeted for one location or one issue specifically. For example, as I tried to think in Plymouth what that could possibly even be, the thought that came to mind is if we had fecal coliform that is showing up in certain wells in the town of Plymouth, that you could have a moratorium on new residential growth in those areas. But the other part of that is not only do you have to identify the issue that you need to have looked at, you have to have a plan in place to study that issue and come up with actions to address that issue. And the other big issue is that the court cases out there have recognized that a moratorium can't be longer than 2 years. So when you talk about one, we're talking about a maximum of 2 years. And I'll talk a little bit more about town meeting, but it does require a vote of town meeting. And we'll talk a little bit about the protections that property owners have from these changes in a future slide. But if today we said that we would like to consider a moratorium in Plymouth, it would be 6 months from now before we can impose that. It would be at the October town meeting. And it's also important to remember that existing developments, so where we see a lot of growth right now, whether it's the Pine Hills or Red Brook or some of the other subdivisions are out there, they'll all be protected from this change because they're already approved. Also, we have some of the lowest zoning densities allowed by the Commonwealth in our rural parts of the town. So 75%, 80% of the town is zoned rural residential, 3-acre zoning. I think it would be incredibly difficult to identify any issue that would need study to warrant a moratorium in an area that has such low densities. And also, many of the grants that this town applies for, and you've seen often the number of grants that are out there that the state, one of the first questions on almost all of them is, do you have a moratorium in place? So that moratorium will either we lose the ability to get grants or will be severely downgraded for the competitiveness of a grant if we had a moratorium in place. The other thing that's very important to note, and again, when I talk about outdated laws in Massachusetts, the way the laws are written now, it says as a subdivision plan is submitted to the planning board before the effective date of town meeting. So again, if we said we want to do one, we're telling property owners for the next 6 months, if you file a subdivision plan to the planning board and it gets approved, you're protected for 8 years from any zoning change. So what can happen is that if property owners are aware, they file a plan, and it's important to note, subdivision is not discretionary. A subdivision plan says, here's how you have to build a road in town of Plymouth, how wide your streets are, what kind of paving, what kind of sidewalks you do. If you meet that, the planning board's obligated to approve the plan. It's not discretionary. The law goes even farther. It doesn't say you have to build it. It just has to be approved. So there's no requirement that you build it. So if you come in, you file your plan, you meet the requirements of the town, you get approved, you're protected for 8 years, and you don't even have to build a subdivision. And it goes a step even farther. It doesn't say the subdivision is protected, the land is protected. So PA Landers is a great example that we have down in Cedarville, where we went through and did a rewrite of our gravel bylaw and did a lot to strengthen that bylaw. Just prior to town meeting, they filed the preliminary plan, followed by a definitive plan. Planning board is obligated to approve that plan, and now they have an 8-year protection from that new, more stringent gravel bylaw. Also, it's important to note that even if we did this, any of the exempt uses that are exempt by state law, churches, agriculture, educational facilities, so depending on what the moratorium was on, those are all exempt from a moratorium, as is Chapter 40B developments like we see at Oasis or the Walk. And sometimes what will happen is if you tell people you can't use conventional zoning and you can't come in here under town zoning, you force them to do something else, which would be a 40B. So you could be encouraging more 40Bs if you did a moratorium, because it would be an option for somebody to come in to do a development that would override the moratorium. And then I just wanted to close by pointing out that in 1988, the town adopted a bunch of growth management bylaws, which were essentially, they weren't moratoriums, but they were tools that were designed to try to limit growth. The case law treats them as moratoriums, but when we advertised the public hearing to say we're going to put that in, what it did is created an artificial rush, as I would expect that could happen if a moratorium was suggested again. And what happened was we had dozens of plans filed with over 3,000 house lots on those plans. All of that came in just before a town meeting voted. And for the most part, except for the Forges Field property that the town actually purchased, almost all of those 3,000 lots were actually permitted and built. So what we found, and oftentimes other communities have found, is when you talk about a moratorium and you talk about trying to do one, it has a short-term opposite effect, which it actually encourages more growth because people who, over the next 5 years, think they might want to do something, decide they're going to file. And the other thing I would say is the cost this day and age to get a plan approved is probably hundreds of thousands of dollars. So once you've made that investment, even if you weren't planning on developing, you filed that plan, and you're probably pretty much now committed to doing that development. Whereas if you thought, well, maybe in the next 3 years I might do something, I'm not really quite ready, and then you see that there's a moratorium, you say, well, I better go and file my plan. Now I've invested quite a bit of money, and I'm probably going to be obligated to move forward and have that plan approved. So again, it's a very difficult thing to use. You have to identify a specific issue, can't use it for townwide, and what we find many times is it has the opposite effect often, where you actually are encouraging in the short term more growth, not discouraging it, and giving people the option that if they can't use conventional zoning, they'll come in under 40B. And when I point out at 40Bs, the sawmill development down in Manmet right now, that was approved for 20 houses as under conventional zoning. They have 200. There are 2 house twin pines off of Carver Road, 2 house lots, there are 16 units there. So when we talk about 40Bs, it's often at a much higher density. So again, I think for all those reasons, and without really a defined issue that needs to be researched in the town, it's a very difficult challenge to talk about or apply a moratorium in a town like Plymouth. Right. Steve, do you want to add anything now?
Good evening, everyone. Steve Bolton, Chair, Plymouth Planning Board. Just echoing a little bit of what Mr. Hartman said, when you talk about moratoria, you're talking about 3 types of challenges. We have administrative, we have legal, and we have practical. On the administrative side, what Mr. Hartman didn't mention is, assuming that town meeting were to pass a bylaw, it still has to be approved by the AG's office. State Attorney General has absolute right to review and determine the legality of our bylaws. And the state has obviously made it very clear that they have a desire for more housing in all areas. So the state there's no question the state would be looking for a reason not to grant a bylaw placing a moratorium on residential home development. They also wouldn't have to look very far in order to find that legal reasoning. Zoning restrictions intended to limit residential development have been found to violate both the U.S. and the Massachusetts constitutions. Addressing this issue in Massachusetts specifically, the U.S. Supreme Court said that while a town may not want a new wave of permanent home seekers, it does not serve the general welfare of the Commonwealth to permit one particular town to deflect that wave onto its neighbors. Using that particular rule, the Commonwealth has a number of cases regularly holding that zoning bylaws cannot be used for setting up a barrier against the influx of people who want to live in the community. And this applies not just to the arguments, oh, we're stopping people, but the arguments that say, well, these people are creating a strain on our services and a problem with our infrastructure, and so we need to place a moratorium, a restriction on that. 2004 Supreme Judicial Court case said it in the clearest possible terms. I'll quote in this instance: preventing the entrance of newcomers in order to avoid burdens on the public services and facilities is not a valid public purpose. It can't be any clearer. A moratorium to keep people from moving into Plymouth because it's placing a burden on our services is unconstitutional, would never be approved. Then we have the practical considerations that Mr. Hartman discussed. It's just not a practical thing to do for us, because if we could identify an issue, and if we could then go ahead and say we're going to create a plan to study it, and thus spend the money that we would have to do to study the issue and fix the issue over a limited period of time, all we're doing is pushing things off. The ultimate result, unfortunately, is that the local people who are looking to build and to develop and stay in our community, they're the ones who get hurt. What happens instead is that larger outside entities that can afford, through resources, to purchase property at a depressed level, and a moratorium certainly depresses property values, will do that and sit and wait it out. We will then end up with outside developers building in our community rather than people who are invested in our community. So the crux of what I hope to say is that Plymouth needs to, when it comes to planning, stop looking at the things we can't do. There is no easy fix. The "all we need to do is" phrase is never going to be the correct one. We can't stop certain things from happening. The state has made it clear. So what we need to do is stop looking at the quick fix and really focus on planning the things that we can control. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Canty, and then Mr. Mahoney.
Well, thank you to Mr. Hartman and Mr. Bolton for outlining all of the reasons why a moratorium, although it sounds like a good idea at first pass, is not a practical solution to Plymouth's woes. Because I agree that it would, as Mr. Hartman said, encourage people to file plans that they may not have otherwise filed, because if they're local developers, they don't want to, for a period of up to 2 years, if one were to be passed an area they're thinking of a develop, not be able to work during that time. So it incentivizes them to accelerate a plan, perhaps not without having thought it through in the same careful way they would have. So we'd end up with more and possibly worse developments as a result of that sort of thing. And the fact that it also, that a 40B would be exempt from the moratorium because it overrides local zoning, and a moratorium is a local zoning change, means we'd be stuck opening ourselves up to what is often considered to be the worst form of drain on services in terms of its density in the community, which are other things to consider there. So, as is often the case, the easy solution is often not a practical solution, and I think this is certainly the case here. We are often asked about moratorium and why we don't have one and wanting one, but for all the reasons that were outlined tonight, it doesn't do what we would like it to do, and in fact, it would probably make the situation significantly worse. So I think that's just important to highlight, and I appreciate Mr. Hartman and Mr. Bolton doing so eloquently. Thank you.
John?
I'm just going to touch on a couple of topics that I've mentioned before. So I appreciate the chair putting this topic on. This is something that really should be, presented every 5 years at least, because it is informational, and this needs to get out there, because we deal with the inquiries for the public with respect to how do you stop overdevelopment. So Mr. Bolton mentioned the Constitution a couple of times. Whenever there is a controversial development, you can look online, and typically there's a few people that come in and say, did you buy the land? Something to that effect. And I know in the last month or two, Mr. Bletzer has said that if you want to control it, you have to own it. So the single greatest thing you can do is own the land. So again, Boston and the 128 belt, and the objective is you want to have a balanced community. So Boston and the 128 belt, 90 years ago, through eminent domain, the state took the land and created the Quabbin Reservoir. They forced 4,000 people out of their homes, they put up a dam, and then over the last several decades, they've continued to buy thousands of acres to create a water reservoir that is surrounded by 158 miles of square miles of land to ensure the quality of that water. So they didn't have, they were given that, they didn't have to work for it. 125 years ago, the city of Brockton, again, the state comes down to the communities of Pembroke, Halifax, Plimpton, and Kingston, and tells them that the complete control of the seventh largest body of water naturally occurring in the Commonwealth will go to the city of Brockton. So that they currently today take 10 to 13 million gallons of surface water through a pipe over to the city of Brockton for their needs every day. And that the citizens of the South Shore, specifically those 4 communities, can't recreate, bathe, fish, swim, or boat on that body of water. In Plymouth, we are on our own. So there's been too many opportunities in the last 25 years where the community has not been aggressive enough with buying or securing strategic parcels of land for open space, which obviously gives a little bit of control over development, but also ensures that we're protecting the aquifer and getting us more quality water resources. So I just want to mention that the 4 principles of a proposal that got through town meeting within the last year, Mr. Bolleton, Mr. Canty, Mr. Golden, and our former colleague, Mr. Helm, what they brought forth in that land bank, that has the potential to potentially be the most visionary thing that this community has done in decades. And that could be a very important tool protecting this community going forward.
Any other comments from the board? Seeing none, I would like to say thank you for us, and the reason I asked for it was take a breath, and everywhere I go, somebody's asking me, you know, what are you doing, and, you know, some of it goes with the job, some of it doesn't. I don't say go talk to the planning board, but they don't understand, and that's why I wanted to have a presentation. But we're at a point in Plymouth where people are really feeling it, paying their taxes, paying their water bill. You look at our neighboring communities, and I'm not going to name them all because I'll probably name the wrong ones, but I know Duxbury, there's several communities out there that are going for overrides, which brings us to the second part of this conversation. And then the third part of the conversation is, how are we going to avoid that? With the commercial growth we got going, we all talk about it. Everybody that runs for office talks about it. Is there a real plan out there, Steve? I mean, and I don't know who owns the land out there, but I'm going to say Edwards maybe, the sanding operation by where the concrete is, used to be exit 7. Is that going for rezoning that 50 acres, correct? Is that going to be commercial? So I guess I'm saying is, why as a community wouldn't we sit down at a table with somebody like that and try to plan out what's best for this community, or what best fits in there? If you look at it, the way it's, the dirt's taken out, you could put a 10-story, and I didn't measure it, but I'll bet you can put a 10-story building there and not even see it down the street. And it's in an area that there's no houses. It's, you know, I live in that area. So what are we doing as a town to try to pre-plan that or help? Why don't we reach out to whoever owns that, or whoever else the developer might be, and have them sit down before they have little ideas of their own, or bringing this one in. Maybe we don't think as a community that's something we really want, you know? I mean, we know people want Trader Joe's. We know people want Whole Foods. You know, you can't always get what you want, you know the song? But I mean, I think we need to be proactive. And I also know with the new growth we're getting, we're not gonna, the books aren't gonna balance here either in a few years. So that's another wake-up call. You know, nobody wants anything in their backyard, whether it's Hedges Pond Road, or no matter where it is. I mean, this is 104 square miles. I know he's gonna correct me, that's why I'm looking at him. Oh, 105 now, okay. I was gonna say 106, but I went a little shy. So I guess, you know, what do we do as a community to, you know, and there's other ones, there's Sampson, there's Whitman. Every time you look on the paper, they're all having budget woes, and they're going for overrides.
Mr. Chair, you bring up a true challenge for our community. And it was one of the reasons why the planning board advocated so strongly to update our town master plan. We've spent the past year listening to our community, getting their thoughts, their ideas, and learning a great deal about our town. And we'll be coming out with a lot of information. The existing conditions portion of our master plan is in the process of being finalized right now. The last draft that I saw of it is 125 pages of information detailing exactly what is going on in our community, so that we make decisions in the future based upon not just what we hear, but on empirical data as well. So I think that when it comes to key parcels of land, as well as just general practices, we're going to be seeing a lot from our master plan in terms of how we address sample areas like the ones you're speaking about. Areas where we have disused retail or other facilities, how do we properly develop those? Areas where we have a need for housing based upon our existing infrastructure, where we can expand our infrastructure and where we can enhance our existing infrastructure. And our open space, which needs to be preserved for all of the reasons that Mr. Mahoney stated. The critical infrastructure that is our aquifer, without which this town does not exist. So hopefully within the next few weeks, you'll be seeing the existing conditions. We'll be doing another town forum late May, early June, in order to get further input from the residents, and then we will be spending those lazy, hazy summer days drafting our master plan for this body, for the planning board and town meeting to look at and consider and understand what our residents want us to do, with some concrete ideas as to how to try and accomplish them.
Okay. That sounds good, but we don't have a whole lot of time. You know, and we can go right into electric, because I'm not afraid to say nuclear. You know, I've been talking about the SMR 300 now for a little over a month. And sooner or later, the Commonwealth, as well as the country, unless our new president starts putting pipelines everywhere, you know, anything's possible. But in the case that he doesn't, we have it right in our backyard, and that would help considerably on property tax and maybe discount rate for the residents. We learned one lesson, not to discount the property tax to a point where everybody moves here. We already learned that lesson, but these are...
But have we, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we
We'll
have.
find out, we'll find out in the future.
Yes, we will. But these new plants are a lot different. They're built a lot different. They're using them in Europe, and they're using them over here. They broke ground, I believe, on 2 over here. So they're getting closer. And I think it requires at least conversation at a state level and a town level.
Well, Mr. Chair, I can certainly tell you that the residents have been talking about it, and it is not the universal no that may have been the case when we were thinking back X number of years ago, and there were all the problems at Pilgrim with an aging and sometimes not fully maintained facility. But in terms of getting you things, we'll do it as quickly as possible, but to paraphrase the historians, Plymouth wasn't built in a day.
Well, I just, you know, that's one saying. There's a few more. But that being said, I hear what you're saying totally, but I have to ask, and I like to bring this up so people know that we're aware of what's going on and what, you know, have this conversation so they know some of the answers themselves. And I think it makes it, the more communication we have with the public, the more hopefully understand, and keeps our minds, you know, going forward. So I don't want to keep going on and on, but I do appreciate your time, and I look forward to anytime the process starts for that rezoning of the 50 acres and what might go there. I would love to be a part of that, whether I'm sitting here or not. I'm still a resident of the town, And I live in the area, so it's not like it's not in my backyard. But it's in the right area, you can get everywhere from there. There's not a lot of housing there, at least there isn't right now. So, you know, who knows what the future brings. And I'm hearing that our numbers might be up on our housing count, is that official? And what's that account right now, about, roughly? Is it 9 point, Mr. Hartman,
No,
no?
nine-
Is it the email we got? Because I know the number, but I don't want to say it.
Yeah, do you want to talk about it, or you want me to talk about it? Yeah, do you want,
9.26.
Yeah, if.
Yes, so we, working with, and there are a bunch of different groups that are involved with subsidized housing. So it's a little bit of a challenge when these things come in, that they're approved maybe through Habitat, private developers, CPC, 40Bs that we don't necessarily even see. So it's been a great effort for us as a community, the staff that we have, to go through it and make sure we have the right numbers. So right now, what we have, and just today, our numbers got updated by the state. So we've been working for about 6 months to get a bunch of the ones that everybody's been talking about, to have them put on. And finally, today, we got notice that the count that they gave us today is 1,578 affordable units, which is about 6%. We are now still waiting for about another 277 to be added to the list. That's not about 277 to be added to the list, which will bring our number to 1,855. So what we have now approved and on the books is 7.22%. If we look at what else is out there, we know we have the Claremont property for 300 units. We know we have, to some degree, Cottage Park with 300-plus units. We're not sure what the mix of that is, whether it's all rental or condos. We have the 38 units that'll come out of the 150-unit Pulte. It's only the 38 because those are ownership. And then we have the ones under development or about to break ground soon for Makepeace, the ones that Makepeace are responsible for, and then a scattered group of others. But when we look at all those that are on the books, that will get us to 2,378. No guarantee all that gets built, but again, what we feel reasonably comfortable is out there, and that will bring us to 9.26%, which then, if all of that happens, we're pretty close, would be short of about 191 affordables to hit our 10%. My guess is, by the time we get to that, or if we hit 10%, it'll be just in time for the new census to come out, and we'll have a new number and a new goal once the 2030 census comes out. But again, we have some of the highest numbers we've ever had for affordable housing in the community.
So that will put us in safe harbor, we have, what, 2 years?
So if we hit 10%, and I'm
No,
don't-
if we don't hit 10, if we, it's
So-
between 8 and 10.
So what we would need to do is have something, let's say the Claremont property. Claremont property comes in, and the day after it gets approved by the zoning board, we can apply for a 2-year safe harbor. I think at this point, Claremont's the only project I'm aware of that's going to get us to that 2-year safe harbor. So the day the ZBA approves it, the next morning, we would file and request safe harbor. That would be good for 2 years, provided they pulled a building permit within a year. If they don't pull a building permit within a year, we only get 1 year safe harbor from it. But let's just assume ZBA approves it, we apply, we get a 2-year safe harbor, and within a year, they pull their building permit. And that'll give us 2 years.
And last question, when we get to 10%, what does that get us?
It gives us the ability to say no to 40B. So it doesn't mean that 40Bs are automatically denied, but if a 40B comes to the community and the community chooses to say this is not something we'd like to see in this town, it gives us the ability as a community to say no, and that's it. Right now, if we say no to a 40B, clearly 90% of those decisions are overturned at the state level in favor of a developer. So it's very hard to have a 40B denied currently. If we hit that 10%, we have complete control.
And how long, is there a time frame? I mean, is it till the next census? Or-
Yes, so once we hit the 2030 census, which will come out in 2031, they'll give us a new unit count and say, here's your new number
We
based
could
on
go
what's
back.
happened.
We could go back at that point.
Well, again, what'll happen is they'll say between 2020 and 2030, X number of units have been constructed, and now you have to have your new number. Right now, we're at 25,000 year-round houses. So let's just say in 2030, we're at 28,000. So now they're going to say our new number is 2,800. And so it will, the new goal will be higher based on what we have for background growth.
Very good. Thank you.
So that's going to bring me to this question. Knowing that, when you have a development come before you, it would be fair to say that 10% of it should be affordable. Or if we wanted to be, as you say down here, aggressive, we would tell them we'd want 15%. And that would, and yeah, he's making faces. But that would keep up with the mom and pop little house developments along
Yeah,
with
so
the
every
larger ones.
Every new development that comes in is required to have 10% affordable. So there's also another part of this, and we're kind of going well past moratorium, and you have other things on your agenda, but there's two parts of affordable. Right now, we're focused on trying to hit that magic number with the state to give us the control we should have in the community about what we do or don't want. But that's based on an average family income. That's really not realistic. So the second part of affordability is how do we make units that are actually truly affordable that the children and elderly in this town can actually afford. And right now, they base their number on 80% of the average income based on the Boston-Cambridge area. We should be really looking at something more like 60%. So it's more complicated than just saying, how do we get more units? It's also about how do we actually, if we have to have all these units, how do we actually make them affordable for our residents?
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in and educating and having this conversation. Appreciate it. Mr. Anderson?
Connor Anderson, I'm the archivist and the records access officer for the town. So as part of the policy audit that Jade Anderton and myself are doing, the question was raised if there were any appointed committees by the select board that have not been dissolved. So I did a little bit of digging, and I think I gave you guys 83. I was actually able to narrow that down to 79. So, then these, everything from 1907 to 2022, which is, so the select board minutes were they first began typing them in 1907. And the records management software that we have, it's text searchable. It's OCR, it's Control F. So I was able to go back until between 1907 and 2022 was the most recent one, I believe, was the Science House Task Force. And it's everything from the committee to investigate the proposition of the Boston Woven Hose and Rubber Company to do away with the bridge over a wasteway at their mill, to the town manager screening committee from 2021. So it's all that in between. Most of these have either accomplished their task. There's an instance with the Casino Impact Committee. They said in the meeting minutes that there were no objections to the committee being dissolved, and then just moved on with the agenda and just never bothered to vote. So it's stuff like that where it's either neglected and forgotten, or a lot of the times, I think there's several ad hoc committees, but what they would do is they would set the member terms to no defined value, and it would be like until the task is completed, until a report is submitted. And what I think would happen is they kind of figured that meant, okay, well, the committee's gone too. But there would just be no vote. So I don't know how you want to go through this, or if you want to go through it.
Well,
Like I said, it's down to 79.
we have a list
so.
here.
So the ones that I was able to, which ones were they? There were the Consolidation Committee, the Audit Committee, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and the Nutrient Management Committee. So my recommendation is that the board dissolves the other 79 committees listed.
Could you repeat that list?
Sorry, it's the Consolidation Committee, the Audit Committee, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and the Nutrient Management Committee.
And why why are those ones?
So I was able to locate in the meeting minutes, so those were part of the consolidation committee in 2012, when the town did a review of all the committees and kind of the departments. It was a little vague as to when they actually dissolved those committees, and I was able to go back and do some more digging, since I submitted the first spreadsheet to Jade.
Oh, so these ones have already been dissolved?
They were dissolved, yes.
Okay. So one of the listed committees is the Nuclear Matters Committee. So the Nuclear Matters Committee, my understanding, it was started on July 8th, 1986, so as Mr. Mahoney will tell everyone, Holtec was still operating, or as it was known at the time. And eventually, when the closure of the plant was announced, the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel was created under state law, and my understanding is that a lot of the actions of the Nuclear Matters Committee were kind of duplicative of what NDCAP did, plus other things. But NDCAP, one of the seats that this board controls on the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel is someone that is on the Nuclear Matters Committee. And because we can't modify that, because it's a state statute, I would suggest that instead of dissolving, today at least, the Nuclear Matters Committee, we could consider, there's no minimum amount of people that are on a committee. So I don't think there was, my understanding of Nuclear Matters in its later years was they were hard to keep a quorum. A lot of people resigned en masse. The work was duplicative of NDCAP, so people weren't applying. But if someone was interested in serving on NDCAP, one path that they could go is to be appointed to Nuclear Matters as a single person and then serve on NDCAP as their only responsibility. That would be an easier solution than trying to amend state law. So for that reason, I would suggest that we not dissolve, at least today, Nuclear Matters, see if anybody is interested potentially in serving on NDCAP. It's quite the experience. And then we could always readdress dissolving it if we wanted to. But that's it.
Okay. Any other comments? So what would you want to do with the Nuclear Matters Committee?
I would, so other than the ones that Connor already addressed, which we can remove from the list because they've already been dissolved, I would also ask that we remove Nuclear Matters Committee from this list, and then we could have a motion to dissolve the remaining committees, unless there are additional boards or committees that other members don't want to dissolve.
So your motion is?
My motion is to, I would make a motion to dissolve the committees listed in the materials, except the Nuclear Matters Committee, Consolidation Committee, Audit Committee, the Solid Waste,
Advisory Committee and Nutrient Management
the
Committee.
Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and the Nutrient Management Committee.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Golden. Discussion, Mr. Blitzer.
So, Connor, are those committees that you want to keep, you're recommending keep, are they active?
No, they've already been dissolved.
They've already been dissolved.
Okay,
I was able to go back and locate when they were dissolved.
okay. All right.
Yeah, so mine is one I don't want to dissolve, and the other ones listed in the exception are already dissolved.
Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion? Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes,
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes, unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Connor. And Nuclear Matters. Anyone wishing to speak under public comment? Jade? No? Last call. Nah? I'm good. Town Managers Report, Mr. Brandisi.
All right, good evening. I just have a few updates for this evening. So this morning, the Department of Energy and Environment reported that they are actively out there installing the camera box at the fish ladder at Jenny Pond. So as you all know, over the past number of years,
Installing
they've
what?
been using this camera to monitor the seasonal fish migration. So they've already started that in preparation for the spring season. Additionally, they have started to place the signage at Long Beach and White Horse Beach to protect the birds, the piping plovers that live in that area. As you know, as of 2 years ago, we've identified piping plovers at White Horse Beach. So want to ensure that we're protecting not only Long Beach, but White Horse Beach as well. Some really interesting news came out of the Recreation Division. Last night, they opened up their seasonal programs for this coming summer, recreational programs, and by 9 a.m. this morning, they've already signed up over 1,000 children to the various programs. So, as we all know, very popular recreation program we have here in town, and so we're encouraging others, if there's still seats available, to go to the website as soon as possible to sign up your children. And then a couple of weeks ago, as we reported, the town, working with the contractor and AD Makepeace, organized a meeting at, was it a middle school? What school was that? Plymouth South Middle School, to notify, have a conversation with the community regarding the final intersection improvements at Halfway Pond and Long Pond Road. So as you know, this has been years in the making. This is the last intersection improvement that needs to be completed. We had about 70 members who attended that meeting. It was a great back and forth discussion with the contractors. We had our DPW officials were present, answered a lot of questions. So the long and short of it is that the construction will take place in the beginning of the school break in April. We're expecting construction season to take place throughout the summer months. We're hoping to have completion of the project by the beginning of the next school season, which begins at the end of August. So we'll keep the community apprised as to the milestones. We know that there's been a couple town meeting members who have already reached out to us. They're asking for other ways to be updated. So working with the DPW director, we're going to create a link on the engineering website so that we can post new information, milestones, and anything else that may come out of this project. So moving on, I just want folks to be aware that next Thursday, the town moderator at 6 p.m. In this room will have his annual town meeting preview and presentation night. So again, that's a public meeting. Folks want to participate and get a first eye glimpse of what's happening at town meeting. I also want to report that the police department received a burn grant for about $17,000. They're going to use this $17,000 to buy 6 new electric bikes. As you know, many of our officers use electric bikes during the summer months, especially in the downtown area. So we appreciate the county commission for awarding the town the $17,000 for the electric bikes. Pending any questions, that's all I have for this evening. I do want to bring up 2 more things now that I think about it. Number one, we will be posting updates. We talked about the bridge project the state was undergoing over by the M Road. And I have received reports from Selectman Golden that at certain intervals, that this road has been closed. We did reach back to the contractor and Mass DOT and the State Police Department. They have concerns with that project. And so there will be times that they're going to close that road for public safety concerns. So as that information is reported to us, we'll do the best that we can to alert the community when that road will be closed because of that construction project. So more to come on that. And then I just wanted to circle back on Mr. Hartman's presentation on the affordable housing percentages that he mentioned this evening. So it's great news that we're going to be north of the 9%. However, it's important to know how we got to that number. I think one of my last reports, I mentioned about 8.3%. And the reason being is because we have now the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. As you can imagine, they have multiple departments under that executive office. One of the departments that the town was working with on the MBTA Communities project had reported to the town that we had approximately 28,000 housing units here in town. And so when the planning department was calculating the percentage, they were using that as their denominator. What we found out last week is that, and again, talking to the department that calculates affordable housing percentages, they have stated to us that the actual denominator is 25,000 units. And so what's the $3,000 delta from, 3,000 unit delta from? It's from the number of seasonal units versus full-time year-round units. So we have now learned that we have approximately 3,000 seasonal units. That's what got us to the 28,000 total units. So we're actually only going to focus on the 25,000 year-round units. So as we discussed earlier, that number is going to change in 2030 once we get the new census. So I just want folks to understand the difference of why we were able to get a higher percentage. And that was based upon the number of seasonal units here in town.
Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Derek, thank you for the update. When is the bridge project scheduled to be completed?
So that project, I'll have to go back, but I remember that was supposed to be a 2-year project, and they decided that it was best to focus on closing the bridge down in its entirety versus doing one side at a time. And by doing it that way, being more efficient, they had said it'd be a 1-year project, but I can double check the timeline on that.
Yeah, I think, well, there's not a lot of ways in and out of Manomet, and with the summer season approaching, a lot of those seasonal units are in Manomet, so our population expands quite a lot, and any closure there will place a strain on people trying to get in and out. So if we could have a real solid plan surrounding those closures, or at least some advance notice, that would be very helpful.
All right, okay, we can do that.
Thank you.
Any other, John?
Derek, I obviously have a close family member that lives over near the Jenny Prawn project, and Saturday morning I ran into Mr. Gould. He was out there overseeing the project and the dredging. Because a 2-year, as he had told us at a prior meeting, a 2-week extension had been given to do work in the water. Saturday was that deadline, and now they're out of the water. But it was great to see the progress, and now the contractor can just focus on out-of-water work, which is obviously the bridge construction and moving on to the sidewalk over towards the dam and the grist mill. The second and last thing I want to touch on is the SHI number. To me, is embarrassing and euphoric all at the same time. So it's good that all of a sudden we've leapt from being in the 4% range into the 7, 8, and potentially a little bit over, almost 9.5% range. But how we got here, to me, is unacceptable. And it's come to my attention that both of the variables, using the wrong denominator to divide, and the missing 600 units, were all discovered by a part-time employee that supports the Community Preservation Committee and the Committee of Precinct Chairs. So you always hear the term ROI in business, the return on investment. You could give her the rest of the year off with pay, and she will have earned it. So for a self-starter like this individual to get into that job, and what are we doing here? What are we contributing? The breakdown is roughly 50 grand, 25 each, or roughly between two funding mechanisms?
That's correct, approximately.
Yeah. The return on investment on this discovery is off the charts. So it's unfortunate that it took this long for that committee, specifically the Community Preservation Committee, to get staff support, because it had been needed for well over a decade. The vertical integration was not there. Obviously, there was a multitude of members who were adamantly opposed to it, but her work has been remarkable in the course of only 3 to 5 months. So, obviously, the board, in my opinion, has done our job with respect to rectifying that at the committee level, but, the other half of this is your purview.
So, thank you. I want to say, good job, Derek. I didn't want to, throw it when Lee was here, but it kind of all folded into the big picture, and that's what I just want it to be segmented on one portion of it. So, I agree, I echo with John on that. I haven't met this person, but good job, nice work. I hope she stays with the town. Really, that's the kind of people we need. And I don't know where this one goes, but 44, the manholes in the middle of the road, the side of the road, they're pretty well sinking. And I don't mean a little bit, I mean to the point where they'll be taking out tires pretty soon. I don't believe it's per se, but I don't know what's on the state's agenda. Could somebody check, or have Bill or somebody check on who's going to fix it? I know we don't, but.
Yeah, we can send a notice to Mass DOT.
Yeah, see if they have.
You said there's a number of
what they're
potholes
planning.
on Route 44? Is that what
Yeah,
you
oh,
said?
yeah.
Okay.
From like where Rockland Trust is, Walgreens, all the way down past the fire station. Yeah, it could be, it could be. I'm not sure what the manholes are, but
Gotcha.
they're sinking. It's a state road, so.
Okay. Yeah, we can follow up with Mass DOT. And if I could just respond to the comments regarding.
We call 44.
Regarding Kristen Ford. Kristen Ford's the CPC coordinator that's been referenced by the board. And to your point, we spent 2 years really fighting to get that position in place. And not only this, but, this position has paid dividends, not only with CPC, but COPC as well. I think it's made their work a little bit more efficient as well. So a lot of credit goes to Kristen, and a lot of credit goes to Lynn Barrett, the finance director. It was, Kristen and Lynn who, thought of the idea to do an audit of the SHI percentages. And again, so thanks to Lynn Barrett, our finance director, and Kristen Ford for the discovery. So a lot of great work all around.
And I guess the thing, the takeaway, and I know you have been, but for the sake of conversation, to make sure that they're being recorded differently after, I'm assuming they get town meeting or they get CPC funding, the same as, the tracts of land, making sure that we stay up with it now.
Yeah, so we definitely have better communication with our CPC coordinator and our Office of Community Development to ensure that takes place. Another approach also is, as I mentioned in the past, is that within the next week or so, every unit that we're getting credit for will be posted on the town website, which is great. So we know that there's a lot of eyes on Town Hall, and so we know that if we have it posted on the website, somebody would bring to our attention that a 10-unit project on Court Street may not have been posted in time, and so if that is missed, we certainly can post that. So, that's another approach we're going to take to ensure that we don't have this problem in the future.
Thank you. And when I was asking you about, to me, the old Route 44, it's now Samoset Street. But to me, it'll always be 44. That's where I grew up on it. So. But you are correct. So I stand corrected again. Thank you,
Samoset
Mr.
Street,
Canty.
okay.
All right. So any other questions or comments for Derek? Seeing none. New business? Letters? Old business? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, through you, I would just like to seek an agenda item at our next, the quickest available meeting to talk about special town meeting Article 12. I want to make a motion to take no action on town meeting floor on that article, which obviously is the firearms article. Obviously, there's been a very passionate debate over the course of the last week or two over this topic. A multitude of people have reached out to me, emails flying everywhere, and I think at this stage it would make complete sense to take a step back from this. And there are a lot of data points that need to be filled in. There are a lot of questions that need to be answered. And obviously, as soon as you're willing to do so, I would make a motion at that meeting to make sure that we take no action on this in town meeting.
Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to Mr. Mahoney for bringing that up. One of the emails that we got in regards to Article 12, well, a couple of emails, were in relation to the seeking of a threat assessment for our buildings. And I think we really ought to be thinking about, if the board is to take no action at town meeting, I think we really ought to be looking at a threat assessment and a security plan for the town-owned buildings and properties across the community. A few town meeting members reached out to me and asked a variety of questions, and I believe everyone was on these emails as well. What is the actual threat level? Are there other security measures that we can take to secure our facilities? There are additional steps that are not costly that we can do. Mr. Brindisi, I know you and I had a conversation earlier today about some of those items, but I'd really like to see perhaps from the chief of police or the police department a true assessment of any security concerns that we have for town-owned facilities, so that we can say to the community, this is what we're going to do to secure them, especially in light of Mr. Mahoney's intended path forward with Article 12.
So we have to put it on as an agenda item to revote it?
So the vote can't be taken tonight. So at a future meeting, whether that be next week or the
We
week
can
after, we
discuss
can
the,
put this on the agenda for a formal vote.
Why don't we do that? Why waste time, John? So the motion is,
He just wants it added.
now we're going back to that?
He
Because
wa-
we could make the motion tonight and vote tonight, and then put David's concerns on,
No, we
couldn't?
because we haven't given notice, and we acted on it by signing the warrant, so we can't make a motion to amend something previously adopted in order to comply with the open meeting law. It would have to be at our next meeting or a future meeting.
Which I'm fine with.
that's fine.
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Bledsoe?
I just want to say one thing about, I'm not talking about the issue, I understand the issue. But a threat assessment for buildings, I don't believe, and I'm just going by what the chief said, there hasn't been any threats, there's not so to do a threat assessment on our buildings, we can't do it next 2 weeks. They'd have to evaluate all the buildings, and that would take a long time to do a study. And just be prepared, it will be very costly to completely secure all our buildings. So next week, hopefully the chief will come in, and just so no matter what happens next week, at least everybody should clearly understand what the purpose, what he's trying to do. And I'll say this, and this is all I'm going to say, is it's certainly not the headline you read in the Independent. The chief is not asking for guns in the building. It's not. So I would let him at least speak a little bit if he wants, and I'm going to do whatever the board, I'd like this to be a unified decision, so I have no problem either way on this, on whether to stay how it is or revoke it. So I have no problem with it. So anyway, thank you.
Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to be clear, Derek, I'm not asking for the chief to complete a threat assessment for every facility in the town
Conversation.
in the next 2 weeks. I would like to begin the conversation.
Yeah, I didn't think you were asking for that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. I'll save my comments for the meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Mahoney, second by Mr. Canty. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.